Okay, so I've actually got a session that's already open in my Capture One. I want to talk a little bit about everything else that's going on in here first. If you do not have the files that I had given out to you loaded yet, do not worry about that. We'll get to how you open things and how you can recover things if somehow your session gets perverted or any of that kind of stuff. So we'll get to all that part. Don't worry about this too much. We did talk briefly last week about creating a separate user for yourself to run Capture One in. So again, this would be your login user. And the advantage of that is that you can sort of keep Capture One siloed in its own little environment. And again, the trick to doing that is that you don't want to do anything else in that environment. You could conceivably run Photoshop in that environment as well, because there's a lot of times that I will be working in Capture One. You can't really composite in Capture One or focus stack or do that kind of stuff, or at least, so there's a caveat in all of this. I should just let you guys know this right now. The current version of Capture One is 23 changes right now, so I'm not as possibly proficient in 23 as I was in 21. I would say that probably 90% of it is the same. But every now and then I might get caught in something that it's like, wait a minute, that isn't working like the way I expect this thing to work. I have been working in Capture One though since 2004. So, and I've worked in every single version that exists. So it was version 3 back then. So anyway, so I'll just ask for a little bit of patience in this, but like I say, it's a very familiar space to me, so I'm not too concerned about possibly looking bad. So anyway, back to what I was saying. Capture One typically doesn't do things like Photoshop. It's you do have masking and that kind of stuff in Capture One. You do have layers in Capture One, but you don't really have compositing and that kind of stuff. Or like I say, they may have a focus stack ability now. We'll find out. So, but at any rate, I would not do anything in that user space other than run Capture One and Photoshop. I would never think about adding any third-party applications. I would never think about adding third-party extensions. I would never think about email browsers, any of that kind of stuff. Anything that you run the risk of corrupting that system. Because the cleaner that partition is, the better off we're all going to be. Now, right after I told you I was going to start a timer on this, I didn't bother to start the timer, so hang on 1 second. Right? What good is that? Okay. That's all right. So, are there any questions about that or about how to do that? Okay, good. All right, so just right off the bat, if you open up Capture One and you take a look up at the very top, there's a series of menus that go across the top. We can explore a lot of these. A lot of this stuff is redundant, pretty much like Photoshop. So for instance, these counters and all this kind of stuff, you'll find other places where they really are more closely associated with the tools. So anyway, I don't spend a ton of time up here, but one place that I do spend time is this window menu. So if I can get everyone to go to the window menu really quickly and just get a click on a drop down. And then when you do a drop down to workspace, you can actually see in here that you can customize your workspace and save it. You can delete workspaces, but there's a whole series of canned workspaces. None of these workspaces are mine. All of these ones have been created by Capture One and they exist within this. So you'll see there is a legacy default. It's what Capture One looked like. I don't know which legacy they're talking about, whether this was 21 or whether this goes back to like Capture One 12 or whether this goes all the way back to Capture One 3. I have no idea what this really is. You can find out. So let's just click on default legacy and see what it looks like. And it doesn't look like, oh, there we go. We've got a serious change up in here. So these are called tool tabs across here, and you can see those things have actually changed. If you go back up to that window menu, and it's not just in terms of the tool tabs that are up here, it's the ordering of the tool tabs. You can move all of these things around. It's also the tools that sit up here into the toolbar that's up at the very top. All of this can be changed around as well. So there's a huge amount of customization that exists in this. So anyway, this is a place, sometimes if you get into trouble, this is a great place to go. So all of a sudden you're missing something, just come back up here. And again, if you really do get into customizing your workspaces, you can come here and you can actually save a customized workspace, or you can delete those workspaces, all of that kind of stuff. These are options for you. Typically, a wedding workspace, I have no idea what that would be for. But the truth of it is, the two here that really do matter to us is dual monitor here. And what happens in this is that typically in a digital tech working situation, so in the typical working situation that I work in, so I'm going to have everybody come up to workspace across and down to dual monitor large browser, or I'm sorry, large viewer. So what I will do is when I'm working, I will have a digital tech who's got a monitor, he's sitting at a desk, got a monitor, and I'm tethered to that. I can't see that monitor because I'm on set shooting. So, and then next to him typically will be the art director, and they will not be looking at the same screen. So what you can do in these situations, we don't have two monitors here, so I can't really demo this for you, so I've got to sort of like talk you through this. But what you can do is you can do a second monitor using this workspace. And what happens is that the tech will actually keep all of this, all of the tools and everything else on his monitor. But then on the art director's monitor, this is what you would see. So hang on 1 second. You would see this with no tools. So all of the thumbnails are gone, all the tools are gone. You just see the image that's coming up on the screen. And it's a good thing. It keeps it simplified for them. They don't need to worry about. So that's just, you know, an art director can't come in and screw around with the tool set in here, can't start to do other things in here. It keeps it that way. However, then once you have a dual monitor setup, then you can actually go out to your system, and this would be true. I know this is true of Mac, and I'm 99% sure this is true of Windows as well. You can come out to your system preferences and go to displays here, and you can set up other monitors. Macintosh can support, I have no idea how many monitors. In a typical situation, what will happen here is that you can say, okay, I want to add another monitor, and I want it to mirror what? So what ends up happening is that in my typical setup, imagine this. I've got a tech sitting pretty much at a desk like I'm sitting right here. Right next to them is an art director. The tech has got the full Capture One suite that they're looking at. The art director is only looking at the images as they're being captured. Then I get a monitor as a photographer. They put another monitor right next to me, and they mirror it to the monitor of the art director. So I don't get all the tools and all the distraction either. I just see the image that I'm shooting. And then finally, they will put another monitor out really close. Again, I shoot fashion, so this is just my setup. They'll put a monitor out very close to the model for the stylist to be able to actually watch the same thing that's going on. So a stylist is standing right next to the model, you know, just offset, but can actually watch the monitor and what's coming up and spot the things that need to be fixed, right? So if all of a sudden they say, oh, this, you know, that that sleeve is too long, or that whatever, you know, it gives them that. So that's kind of our setup, the kind of the way that I work with this stuff. And the dual monitor part coming out of Capture One is easiest to achieve if you, again, use this workspace setup to actually do this. So I'm going to go back to the default workspace. Once you get back to the default workspace, you'll see it brought back the thumbnails. So in terms of talking about this area right in here, this big thing that we're viewing right here is called the viewer, ironically. So, and then this space over here is actually called the browser. This is where thumbnails are. So what I would like to do before we really start to explore this space any deeper is I would like to get you guys to actually have the files that I gave you loaded. The problem that you might run into is, anybody tried to open up those files yet? Okay, don't try to open them, because those were created with an older version of Capture One. This part's really important, because what we're going to do is we're going to build a new session, and then we're going to add those files to that new session from the one that I gave you. So the images that I gave you are in a Capture One session that was created with either version 12 or version 21. And I know it seems like, well, wow, there's a big gap between 12 and 21. That was Capture One did that. They went up to version 12, and then they decided that, I don't really know what the decision was, but they decided to celebrate, I think, and then they just skipped to 20. So it went to, it was 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 20. So all of 13 through 19 never existed. It's not like we ignored them, they just were never there. So anyway, so I want to be able to do it. But this also goes to what you do if all of a sudden you have got an issue with a session that is in Capture One. Because the truth of it is, it's like so many things. Instead of trying to rebuild the session, what you simply do is you create a brand new session, and then you bring all of your raw files, everything that was shot, you just bring that into the new session, and you don't have to fuck with all the back and forth and changing everything and this, that, and the other. Does that sort of make sense? Okay, so that's where we're going to start, because I'm going to act as if you guys don't have anything open, which would be great, because this is a good spot for me. So to do that, with Capture One open, there are two ways that you can actually create a new session and or a new catalog. We'll talk about what those are in just a second. But if you take a look right here under the Import button, you should see a series of tool tabs right here. So what these are is these are areas that are collections of tools for you to do specific tasks. Now, you can customize these to death. So I'm just looking at the way it's set up right now at the default. But if you take a look at the first one, it says library. This is where you go in and you do all of the ordering part of things. This is where you would go in and create folders that will hold your images. This is where you create sessions and catalogs. This is where you do all the sort of like the organizational part of it all. That happens here. The one that's right next to it, if you click on it, tethered, this is all about your camera. So this is all about connecting your camera, focusing your camera, using the namings of your files as they come in from your camera, where they go, if you're doing overlays and that kind of stuff. All that kind of stuff is located here. Then if you go to the next one over, I'm not going to do them all, but you can just see what's really going on here. So the shape on the next one over, this is how you would deal with keystoning, and this is how you would deal with lens correction, and this is how you deal with all of those sorts of things. Those would all sort of like happen in here. And then as you go across even more, again, you get into styles, you get into adjustments, colors, refining things, and then finally at the end of it all, you get into exporting your files. So anyway, that's kind of what this is all going about. So we're going to start over on the library. So if I need to get everybody to click on the library tool tab. So it's the one on the far left. We will probably not get out of the library today. It'll probably take up most of our day, if not all of it. So with the library selected, you can come up to the file menu and you can look at the very top of the file menu, and you have two options at the very top. You have new catalog or you have new session. So new catalog, I strongly discourage you from using. The reason I say that is that new catalog is very much like a Lightroom catalog. So what it's designed to do is it's meant to hold every single picture you take for the rest of your life. So if you are a fine artist and you are only going to be making work for yourself and you were never going to work for anybody else, that's not the idea here, whatever, then catalog might make sense. Personally, I use it. I don't really use the cataloging system here, but to be honest with you, perfectly honest with you, I don't use Lightroom either. So it's just not the way that I work. I have a system that allows me to find the stuff that I need very easily. But I'm never really looking for a single image. I'm always looking for a body of work that I've actually shot. So anyway, to that end. Historically, the catalog in Capture One has not been anywhere near as robust as the catalog in Lightroom. So it's conceivable that you could do both. There's no reason that you cannot work with sessions and actually import them into either a Lightroom catalog or a Capture One catalog. You can have both in here. But primarily, as a professional, you're going to be working with sessions. And the reason this is that as a digital tech, say on Monday, you're shooting for Neiman Marcus. And then on Tuesday, you're shooting for Saks. It's two completely different clients, and there would be no reason for you to mix all of that up into one single catalog, much less continue to do that for the rest of your life. What sessions are discrete groups of images that you create these containers for these images. I mean, that's basically what we're really talking about here in a session. But it can be a whole lot more as well. So in sessions, it has a way to actually contain all of your all of your raw captures. If you're doing any sort of developing of your files and outputting them, it's got a place for that. If you throw things away in Capture One, they do not go into the garbage of your system. They actually go into a temporary holding folder in Capture One called trash, to again give you the benefit so that you don't have to worry about actually losing that file. Anyway, getting rid of a file in Capture One is a two-step process. You have to throw it away in Capture One, and then you need to go to Capture One's trash and throw it away from there again into your system, and that's the only way you can ultimately get rid of it. So anyway, there's kind of that distinction between the two. But for me, the session way of working, it's a great way to order your stuff, keep stuff separate, and that's how I work and how I've always worked. Is everybody kind of clear about that, or any questions about this? Okay, so you can see here, and this is, again, I think this is still going to be true, because this has been a bitch of mine since I've started working with Capture One, since they introduced catalogs. You see the order of this is new catalog at the top and then new session underneath it. So this is the first place to do it, but I'm going to ask you not to do it here. Instead, I'm going to ask you to come down. So with your library active, if you look across, right down underneath library, there's a little drop-down menu, but right next to it is a plus. If you click on this plus, it will actually open up, and now you've got new session or new catalog, which is the exact opposite order that exists in the file menu. Can somebody please tell me why they would do that? No one knows, right? It's just the shit that drives me crazy. It's the right hand does not know what the left hand is doing. And it doesn't make any difference, just as long as you make sure that you open up a catalog. Now, one of the things that I'll say about the computers here, and I don't know why this is, I don't know if this is a general behavior, I think it might be, but when Capture One typically opens up, if you've disabled all the startup splash screens or whatever, it opens up as a new catalog. It brings you in. It assumes that catalog is going to be your first choice. And if people are not aware of this, they just go ahead and name it, and then they have a catalog, and then they start shooting to this catalog. And it's not that you can't get your raw files out of the catalog. You can, but it's just an enormous pain in the ass, and you've lost so many of the benefits that Sessions actually gives you. So that's what we're going to look at and talk about right now. So we're going to start with new session. So go ahead and click on new session. It'll open up a dialog box. A lot of this stuff we've already gone over here in class, but I want to make sure that this is a total explanation of Capture One kind of from beginning to end. So even though we've gone over a number of these things in class, I want to make sure that everybody is on the same page with this. So I'm just going to act as if we've never talked about any of this. So it's going to start with the name first. So this is where I'm going to start. For me, I use this naming convention. You guys already know this about me, and I cannot strongly suggest my naming convention was a consequence of working in Capture One for all of these years. So for me, it starts with the year. So if you'll go ahead and please make this session with me. So I'm going to ask you to name it the same thing that I would actually name it. So I'm going to start with 20241018. What's that? Exactly. It is year, month, date, not month, day, year, the way typical people in the United States do it. And the reason you want it like this is that this will then keep all of your sessions in chronological order. If you start and you do the way typically they do in the U.S. with month, day, year, then all of your Januaries will be together, and all of your Februaries will be together, and all your Marches will be together. It will not be in chronological order. It will be scattered all over the place. And God forbid you start with the day first. So, then an underscore. You can use dashes in this. There are illegal characters that you have to avoid. There are no forward or backward slashes allowed in this. You can do it, but it will fuck things up. Anyway, no forward, backward slashes, no question marks in here. There's a whole litany of things. You can do a Google search and say, what are illegal characters for Unix servers? That's the thing that everybody worries about. Unix servers are the places where it's basically where everything in the cloud is stored. So it's what Amazon uses, it's what Microsoft uses, it's what all those people use. And the problem with it is that they reject certain characters in names, and you need to make sure that you're avoiding that part. So at any rate, I'm going to start here, and then again, for me, and again, if this was for Neiman Marcus, it would be NEI. If this was for Saks, it would be SAK. If this was for General Motors, it'd be GEN. I mean, it's just a simple way, and it helps identify who the client is so that you know, if you start to look through this stuff and you go, oh yeah, I'm really looking for the beauty shots that I did for Neiman Marcus 2 years ago. It is so simple to get there because your stuff is in chronological order, so you can find 2 years ago very easily. And then how many sessions did you really shoot for Neiman Marcus? Chances are you're not shooting for them every day. For me, I shot for a whole cornucopia of clients, so it was relatively simple to find. And yeah, maybe there was 4 or 5 of those days that I would also have a tag with a keyword on it that said beauty, but it's a simple way to do that. That's basically the way I work with this. So anyway, I'm going to do CCC for Columbia College Chicago. Then I'm going to put in another underscore, and at this stage of the game, I put in a keyword. Now, the way I tell people to do this is you can think of the term keywords, plural, because if you count the number of letters in keywords, you get KEYWORDS. That is 8 characters. You are allowed 8 characters for a keyword in this. You do not want to go over that, because if you do go over that, your naming for your files will end up being too long for Unix, for some Unix servers, not all of them, but for some. And if you go over 32 characters, then again, those servers can reject your files, and that becomes a real problem when you are trying to upload stuff that you have shot for a client, and they're expecting it to be on their server, and it's not there because you used too long of a name to actually do this correctly. Are we good on this part? Okay, so for me, this is going to be Capture One demo, right? So I'm going to do C1, you can use letters, numbers in here, Pro, demo, D-E-M-O, and then I'm going to count this out, C1 P-R-O-D-E-M-O. That's 9 characters, that's 1 too long. So I'm going to kill the O and the R. You can use fewer characters than 8. You don't have to use 8. You can use 7 or 4 or whatever it is. You can use fewer, you just can't use more. Now, this is less important now than it used to be, but I typically will do this all lowercase as well. Again, in the older days, I think that things have gotten better. In the older days, capitals would also be rejected. They were considered illegal as well. So I've just gotten in the habit of doing it like this. So this is the way I would do it. At this stage of the game, I want you to select the entire name. So just click outside of it. You might have to click and drag across it to select the entire name. And then you need to copy this. So I'm going to do Command-C on a Macintosh, Control. So if you're on Windows, every time I say Command, for you, it's Control. Control-C, Command-C. You might be able to get to, you actually still have a live edit menu, so you can get to copy on your edit menu right here. It just helps to have the exact thing that you've got going on here for your, to move on in this. It just, again, I'm dyslexic. I have a very difficult time looking at this and having to retype that exactly in some other space. So it's just easier for me to actually copy it. I know it's now on my clipboard, and if I need it later on, I can put it somewhere else. Then where you put this is critical. So if you click on the little 3 dots that are underneath this in terms of location, so I'm going to put this in a separate location. So again, we've talked about this in this class before. I'm going to talk to you about it again. The worst place in the world that you can put your desktop. Your desktop is a database. It keeps track of all the files on your computer. And every time you add a file to that database, the entire database has to be rebuilt. So if you are shooting tethered to the database, to the desktop, software is what, it has to recatalog that. And what happens is that it'll start to slow things down considerably. So if you've got an impatient art director, and all art directors are impatient, then basically you're screwed, because they're going to be yelling at you, why is this taking so long, why is it taking so long? And it's because you've actually, that idea is that you're, every single capture that you shoot has got to move through the cable that is connecting your external hard drive. Now, your external hard drive can be incredibly fast. You could have an SSD that's on the side that's like a screamer, but then if you connect it using a USB 3 cable, it is limited in its time to what the USB cable can actually do, and that is incredibly slow. The fastest by far storage in your computer is your internal hard drive. So number one, you want to always shoot to the internal hard drive. Number two, you don't ever want to shoot to the desktop. So the safest place on a Macintosh is the pictures folder. You could do it to another folder, but what would be the purpose of doing it to your movies folder? Movies is just as fast and just as safe as the pictures folder. So is downloads, so is documents. All of those pre-canned folders are just as fast. But it doesn't make sense because you're making pictures. So it just seems to me to make sense to put it in your pictures folder. So I'm going to click on my pictures folder and say that's where I want you to put this. And then again, so this is now the choose box. I'm going to go ahead and say okay to this. So now it's going to populate this and it's saying, yep, you can see right here, this is in my pictures folder right here. In the template right now, we're not going to talk about doing a template. We're going to leave that blank right now. The advantage of using a template is that let's say that you're working for a company over and over and over again, and they use the same naming convention for all of their sessions except for a date or an extension or a keyword or something like that. You can actually save the general setup of this as a template, and then you can it just saves you time. You can just go back and load the template every time. But for our purposes right now, and in my case, for the majority of the time, I was working for tons of different people, so there was no reason to really have or use a template because I was all over the place anyway. Then finally down here, the parts that are down here, this share selects folder online and invite reviewers. We don't need to get to that part right now. For us, at least the way I have always done this, is that Capture One is very good at taking all of your thumbnails and creating websites out of it. And that's what I ultimately will share with clients if they're not just getting the files directly. And then finally, this open a new window. This is, to me, one of the more dangerous things about Capture One, and I strongly suggest nobody check this. The problem with this is that you can have multiple open windows in Capture One, which basically means you've got multiple open sessions in Capture One, but your camera can only connect to one of them. So if you right now have let's say we've got a camera that is connected to the current session that's visible to me, and I say, okay, I'm going to create a new session, and I want you to open this in a new window. That new window will open up. It will cover the old window perfectly. I will not know that there is another window under there, but my camera is connected to the window that is under there. And all of a sudden, you will be tearing your hair out. Why can't I get my camera to connect to Capture One? And it is because it is connected to Capture One. It's just connected to a session that's not visible to you. Now, you can find that if you go up to the window menu and click on this drop down, you'll get new sessions. You'll get them all down here. But again, you have to know that. You have to look at that. I've never known a case where there was advantage of having multiple windows open in Capture One that referred to different sessions. Questions about this? All right, so I'm going to go ahead and hit OK on this. So we need to talk about what's now happened. If you take a look over under the library thing, you will see that there's a session tag, and then the session that we just made is sitting right here. Now in your case, because again, in the case of the studio computers, people who've already worked on in this version of Capture One, there'll be a list possibly of previous sessions. In my case, I've actually got another session that's sitting right here. It's actually got the same name on this, except it's a little bit longer in this. This is not the one, this is the one that I had before. But anyway, this will keep track of your sessions. This is sort of like the most recent options that you have on a lot of menus. It'll be, oh, okay, so you worked with this last one, you worked with this one. So it's just a way to navigate back and forth really quickly. But anyway, that's where that part's at. However, I want to actually see the structure of what happened out on my Finder. So this is something that is absolutely critical for Capture One. It's just something for you guys to keep in mind. Drop-down menus are critical to damn near everything in Capture One. Everything. So if you're on a Windows machine, you're in luck, because doing right clicks, it's what's called a right click, whatever, gives you drop-down menus really simply to do. Again, in the original Windows days, it was always a 2-button mouse. There was a right button and a left button on it. Left button would always give you, like a Macintosh does, it will always allow you to pick things, move things around, that kind of stuff. But the right button was always to give you a drop-down option menu. The same thing happens in Macintosh now. It's just that they, in order to evoke it, you need to actually use a keyboard shortcut or a double finger swipe on a trackpad. So if you're on a trackpad, you can do a double finger swipe. I don't really like that part because it actually makes you do a stroke, and if you don't hit that perfectly right, then you don't get the drop-down menu, and you can end up inadvertently moving something around. It's a mess. So the safer method to do it is hold down the Control key and click on anything. So again, on a Windows machine, you have a Control key as well. I'm not certain if it's a Control key, but Al, you can tell me because you're working on a Windows one, right? You can tell me if this part works. So anyway, in a Macintosh world, I want you to hover over the capture folder, hold down the Control key and click, and you will get the drop-down menu that I just told you about. And that's why Windows is so much better for this part of it all, although Steve Jobs would be rolling in his grave right now if he heard me say that, but nonetheless. So what this is now giving us, and you'll see that there's some things that are available to you, some things that are not, like we cannot rename this capture folder, but what we can do here is you can scroll down to the almost to the bottom and say, I want you to show me this in the Finder. And so Ali, you just might say show it in Explorer. Yeah, so every time I say Finder, which is Macintosh's essentially desktop, it's going to be Explorer for Windows. So anyway, click on this and say, show me this in the Finder. And it'll actually take you to the Finder, and it'll show you the capture folder. And this is it right here. So what you can see in this is that, and you can also see what I've got going on here. Remember I told you, this is just a series of ones that I've got. Guys, on my archive storage, I've got thousands of sessions, thousands of them. And they're all in perfect chronological order because of the naming convention that I used. So one of the best things about this is that whenever you do this, your most recent folder is always the one at the bottom. You don't have to go through any of these up here to figure out which one it is. It's always going to be at the one at the bottom because unless you sort it by some weird way, anyway, does that sort of make sense, everyone? But what I want to talk about here then is what this thing just built for us. And we are getting really close to our time. We've got 18 seconds. So we are going to stop for a 10-minute break. I've got 1:41, so I need you guys back at 1:51, and we'll take it from there. So we are recording again. All right, so anyway, back in Capture. All right, so we got to the Finder, and we have this structure right here. So it's important to talk about what is really going on in here and to think about this. So you have got this file up at the very top that's got the exact same name as we just named it. This is your session file, but this is so much more. This is actually all the preferences of your session. And what I mean by that is that as you're working in Capture One, everything that you do, from the way your menus look to the templates that you create, to how things are tagged with color tags, how things are keyworded, all of that, everything about it is kept in this preference folder up here at the very top. So something that's really important, if you actually want to transfer a session to someone else, you cannot just transfer the capture folder. All that's in the capture folder is going to be the raw captures themselves, but then there's also going to be other folders in there that hold the thumbnails of your image. They'll also hold the metadata of your image, things like your keywording and your color rating and any of that kind of stuff. That's all kept inside the capture folder. So that's what's going on in here. You can see if you click on mine, it's blank. Your output folder, if you actually then, once you go through all this process and you start to develop files in Capture One and you want to output them, so you want to create a TIFF or you want to create a JPEG or you want to create any of those things that would be based on your raw file, but essentially you're baking your raw file into something else, that would go into your output folder. Selects folder sits pretty much on its own, and in Selects folder, it's basically just a folder that allows you to drag and drop certain things into it that separates them out of the capture folder. That's a little confusing right now, but I'll get to it later. We get to it in a big way later, so just hold that thought. And then finally, trash. This is exactly what I was talking about before. This is where if you throw something away in Capture One, it does not go down here to this trash, which is your the one for your OS. It stays in this folder right here, and if you then give this session to another person, they are going to get all the files that are in your trash. So just kind of keep that part in mind. But one of the most difficult things about this, to think about this, is that the list in Capture One itself, if you go back into Capture One itself, if you go back into these things right here, you'll see it's the same thing right here. Underneath this session folder, it says Capture Folder, Selects, Output, and Trash. And right now, all of these things point to those respective folders that are out in the Finder. But you can change these things. These things can be redirected somewhere else. And when that happens, people get confused. People think that this folder right here, let me see if I can move this guy. People think that these things right here always refer to these right here. They do when you first set this up, and if you never change that or point them to another place, then you're fine. They will always refer to those. But you can go in and say, I want this Dropbox to be my capture folder. And in that case, this thing right here will not point to this capture folder. It will point to your Dropbox folder instead. And guys, you can get really confused with this part going right here, because you're thinking all the time, oh, this is the capture folder right here, and oh, this is the select folder right here, and oh, this is the output folder right here. All of that is true when this is first set up, but if you go in and change this to a different folder, let's say instead you want an output folder that is it's the place where you put all of your final files to be printed, or all of your final files to be uploaded, or something. You can go in and say, okay, I want a different. This will not change in name. It will still be your output folder. It will still look underneath your sessions folder. It will still look exactly like this, but it will be pointing at something entirely different, and it can really screw you up. Does this make sense, everyone? Are we good on this part? Okay. So I'm going to double click on this. I'm going to hope I didn't just kill my recording. So let me make sure that that's still working. Seems to be. All right, so back out into the Finder. So now we are going to actually move the move the images that we had in the session that I gave to you. We are going to move those into this. So the way I suggest doing this, I'm just going to show you a couple of tricks. When you guys actually copy and paste in the Finder, or you move stuff around in the Finder, do you always do it in the same direction? It's a safety. So this is the way I'm going to show you. This is how I do it, and this is the way I'm going to suggest you do it. I've got a little program up here that will allow me to move and resize my windows around. So that's what I'm going to do right here. It's this little thing right here. If you're interested in it, send me an email. There's a number of programs that'll do the same thing, but I'll send you. It's $5 program, $10 program, whatever. Anyway, if you click on this and then click and drag, it will resize my folder down to here. So I'm going to open up my capture folder here. So this is the session that I'm working on. And then I'm going to get rid of another file right here. I just want two windows. So I'm going to do this window right here as well. I'm going to do the same thing to actually size it from the top. So what I do, and this is just a really good habit to get into, I always move the stuff that I want. A new window, or am I moving the new window to the old one, you can actually end up overwriting a folder that you wanted to keep with an empty folder, and then you have lost your work. Does that make sense to everyone? All right. So I have got my session right here. I've got a capture one, output, selection, trash. They're all empty. The folder that I gave you guys is this one right here, and it's actually called 2020041_CCC_C Pro demo. Can anybody tell me anything about this folder? Well, you can tell me when I created it. It was in April 21st, 2020. Can't you tell me that from this? You can also know who the client was. It was Columbia College Chicago. And you also have a fair idea of what the content in this was, correct? All right. So if you take a look at this capture folder here, you can see there are JPEGs in here. There are RAW files in here. And if you come down here, you'll also see there's this capture one folder right here. If you click on this capture one folder right here, you will see cache and then a series of setting folders. Now, I have opened this folder in various versions of Capture One. That's why there are more than one session file for each one. So every time that I open this into a brand new version of Capture One, it creates a brand new session for that. So this backup one, this backup is the oldest one. This was probably created in Capture One 12. This next one, backup one, was probably in 20, and then this last one was probably in 21. So you do not want to copy these session preferences to your new one. You want to copy everything else. But what I was saying is if you look in this Capture One folder and you see this Capture One folder down here, you also have corresponding settings for this. So I'm going to think that the settings for 141 are the newest. These are all your XMP files. Everybody in here know what an XMP file is? So you cannot, I ask people this all the time, can you tell me a program that will allow you to go in and edit a raw file? Can I go in and edit a CR2 file or an NEF file? You cannot. You can develop one, but you cannot go in and change anything inside that file. And the reason that is that when digital photography first started to take off, Adobe was developing the raw file format, and actually Adobe's file format, Adobe invented TIFF. Every raw file that you have, this CR2 files that you're looking right here, those are all TIFF files that have been licensed to Canon, and Canon puts in a little header into that file that makes it a Canon file, but it's still a Canon file. I mean, it's still an Adobe file format, and Adobe does not sell that shit to Canon. It licenses it. So every time that you buy a Canon camera, there's a licensing fee that's attached to the number of CR2 files that that camera sensor could possibly shoot, and it's paid to Adobe. I know, it's staggering, right? Well, anyway, Adobe is developing this thing, and you know they're all excited about it, and they reach the people in law enforcement, and law enforcement says there is absolutely no way we are going to adopt a digital format. You can do too much in there. You can, I can take Cooper's head and put it on my body. I can commit murder, and everybody will think it's him. And we're not doing that. And so what Adobe said was, okay, well, we'll make you this. We'll make you this deal. We will create a file that you can not only not open or edit, but that if you manage to somehow get inside that file, that the file will self-destruct. And that way we can ensure the integrity of the file. If you have a raw file, then it is the raw file. So that being said, you can't go in and actually say anything about. You can't say, well, okay, I want this white balance, or I want this to be a stop overexposed, or I want, you can't, all the changes that you make inside of Camera Raw, inside of Lightroom, inside of Photoshop, inside of Capture One, all of those things, it cannot be written into that file. It writes it to what they call an XMP file, and it is a file that sits on the outside. I can actually show you one. If we take a look at my retouching class, and we take a look at some of the folders that are actually in here, it's this right here. So you can see that there's this file called 20, this is the raw file that's right here. This right here is the XMP file that's right next to it. You can open these, they're just text files. So I'm going to open this with a text editor. Settings. So you can actually see here that there is an exposure, there's an aperture right here. It'll give you the list of all of this stuff. Where it gets into the stuff that Photoshop has actually done, it's right here. You can see I put in a color temperature of 2000 degrees for this. I've changed the tint to a -63. I've made it a really strange color. I didn't do any exposure changes on this. What else did I actually do on this? Oh, this is how it's been processed here, the midtones. This is all tonal control in here. So that's how they get around this whole raw problem. What happens is that because you cannot edit a raw file, what all of these programs do is they write what are called sidecar files. So in the Photoshop world, it's called an XMP file. In the Capture One, it is a COS file. It's these files right here. So if you do not give somebody these files, then you will lose all of the settings for that you had gone in to control all of this. So you'll see there's this one right here that's called file. It's the whole file name 021. If you take a look right here, this is the XMP file for it right here. So all of this stuff exists in here. In the caches, this is actually where you have all the thumbnails for your files, and you will see there's a thumbnail part right here that corresponds to all of those files, those same files in here. So all of this is located in this capture folder. So what we're going to do is I'm going to go back here to my original folder that we made that's in my pictures folder. Easier just to go there. Easier just to pick the very bottom one because that's the one I know it is. And what we are going to do is you are going to select the capture folder, hold down the shift key and select the trash folder, and you are going to drag all of these down into the session that we just made. In my case, I want to keep the original ones where they are. So if I hold down the option key, I'll get a little plus saying, okay, you're not moving them, you're going to create a copy. So I'm going to create a copy, and it's going to say, oh, those folders already exist. I'm going to click on Apply to All and say Replace. So now in our new session, we have got a copy of all of our raw files that are sitting right here, a copy of our output. There wasn't anything in there, anyway, you guys get where this is going, right? So now when we go back into Capture One, you don't see anything. What the fuck? Is everybody back in Capture One? Do you see anything? The reason you don't is because you haven't picked anything to view. You need to come over and click on your capture folder, and there they all are. So I don't know why this is getting scrambled. If you click on this, the JPEG is actually there, but nonetheless, that's what's going on in here. Does this make sense, what's going on in all of this? Are we good on this part? Okay, so you remember I told you these are now not those folders. These are aliases that are pointing to those folders. So I want you to hover over again the Capture One folder, hold down your Control key or right click on this, click and you will get a drop down menu and you can see other things about this. So again, I can say show this to me in the Finder. You can also say show this to me in the library. The library is actually this whole thing that exists right here. If we start to work our way down, we're going to look at session albums later on, we're going to look at favorites later on, but you see this thing right here that says system folder? And again, I don't know what yours is actually labeled because it's Windows nomenclature. So what do they call this? System folder, and then, all right, so anyway, what's underneath this is actually the folder structure on my computer. Yours will be different because it's the folder structure on your computer. This is the library. Click on it and come down and say, show this to me in the library. It'll actually point to this area right down here. And if you come down wherever it is in here, it's going to show you where this guy actually is in the library. And here it is right here. You can see in this drop down, this is my session that is actually in this capture folder, blah, 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 and we're ready to go. Does that make sense, everyone? So I need everybody to sort of do that part. You see these little icons that are sitting right here along the side? These refer to the capture folders that you've set. Now, I don't want you to do this. I just want you to see what's going to happen here when I do this. I've got another folder in my pictures folder called anniversary pictures. They're pictures, I think, of my parents. I'm going to control click over this anniversary. So I'm going to hold down the control key and click. And I'm going to say, I want you to set this as the capture folder. You will now notice that the capture folder that was in my session has lost its icon. I've actually got this anniversary picture now is set up as my capture folder. Now when I go up to the top again and I click on the capture folder, these are the anniversary pictures of my family. If I control click on this capture folder and say, show this to me in the Finder, it does not show the capture folder in the session, it shows the anniversary folder. So that's what I'm trying to get across to you people is that this, are all aliases that are pointing to what you tell Capture One you want to be the capture folder for this session. It doesn't have to be that folder. Does that make sense, everyone? So I'm going to undo that damage. So I'm going to hold down my control key and click on this and say, show me this folder in the library. It takes me to the folder. I'm going to come back up to my regular capture folder that was part of that session. I'm going to click on it, and then I'm going to hover over it and right click and say set this as my capture folder. Now that little icon is up there again, and then no matter what I select, again, this capture folder now gets me back to the capture folder that is the capture folder of my session. So again, click on this drop down and say show this to me in the Finder, and you will see it's actually picked that folder. So I know what you're saying to yourself right now. You have got to be kidding me. I cannot imagine this guy is going to go this deep into this shit. So it's what I said to you in the very beginning, and it's the attitude that I'm going to have here in all of this whole lecture series about Capture One. This is not, oh, okay, let's explore Capture One. Yeah, that would make a great 20-minute YouTube video. This is the deep dive. I am trying to give you guys the skills that you need to be a consummate professional in this. If you can master this program, guys, you can work anywhere in the world where you speak the language and it's a major city. Anywhere. Shit like this will trip you up. All of a sudden, you don't have capture, you don't even know where the captures are going because somebody came in and fucked with your capture folder setup and actually said, okay, I'm going to mess with them. I'm going to send the capture folders to the trash. Okay, well, that's where it'll go because that's what they set up. And then you're scrambling around looking for stuff going, I can't find anything. Imagine trying to tell a photographer who's got the $100,000 a job a day, the $50,000 a day job, that kind of stuff, and just say, sorry, man, I don't know where your pictures are. This is a nightmare. This is literally giving the baby in the crib the hand grenade. And hopefully it isn't going to pull the pin. Most of the things that I'm going to talk to you about in this are things that have actually happened to me, and that's why I know. All right, are there questions about any of this stuff? Are we good? All right. So now that we're actually in Capture One, and you should have some pictures that you can actually see in here, you can select the top one. That part doesn't really matter. There's ways that we can actually adjust our whole view of stuff here, depending on what it is we're really looking to do. So if you come up to your view menu to begin with and click on the drop-down menu, you can come down and you'll actually see that there is a check mark by the viewer. If you uncheck this, and again, then what you end up getting is you will end up getting all the thumbnails. Now, some people like to edit this way, so it's just a way to actually buy some screen real estate. Does that sort of make sense? So again, it will really help if you guys actually do all of these steps with me. This helps build muscle memory. So again, up to the view menu, down to uncheck viewer, and this is the view that you will ultimately get right here. If you go back up to the view menu and you come down and you check viewer, you will get it back again. If you go up to the view menu again and come down to browser, that's what this thing over on the side is about over here, and uncheck it, you will lose the browser and you will only have the thumbnail part right here. If you go back up to view menu and you come down to browser again, it'll come open again. If you then come up to the view menu again and come down to customize browser, you can see that you can do an auto hide, a place below, labels only, browser toolbar. You can increase or decrease the thumbnail size. You can play all of these games in here. The one most people use in this game is this place below. If you click on that, it drops all of your browsers down, all of your thumbnails underneath. Some people prefer that. If you want an expanded version of this, you can actually go up to the view menu and come down and say, hide the viewer. The viewer is now gone away. It looks pretty much the same in here. However, you have these three little dots, or these three little icons that sit up here that you can use to get different views of what we're looking at right here. So the first view is thumbnail only. If you click on the second icon up at the top, then you'll get a thumbnail that's actually got metadata. Prefer to do this part like this to see this in this way. Once you get to the next one over, you can actually click on the next one over, and actually the next one over is grayed out, and it's possibly because of what I've got this sorted by. If you come over even further, you can see that this is the way these images are being sorted. So if you click on sort by name, you will see that this whole thing will actually change. If you come down and you say, oh, I want to sort this by ISO, you will get all the hundreds are all together, all the ones, these are JPEGs, they don't have ISO information in them. You can play all of these sorts of games in terms with how you sort this stuff. So if you wanted to get all of your verticals in one place, you would do this by height, and then you get all the verticals in one place. So that's the games that you can play in here. I'm going to go back to the original 3 tabs right here, so the bigger of the thumbnails. I am going to go back and add my viewer again, so I'm going to click on my view window, and I'm going to come down and say I want to see the viewer again. So now I have the viewer again. I personally do not like the thumbnails along the bottom. I like them actually on the top. So again, I'm going to come up to the view menu, down to customize browser, and say I want you to place the browser on the right side. So it's now on the right side. Then we've got some options that we can play with over here in the browser part. Let me make sure I'm not getting ahead of myself. Nope, we're not. So over in the browser part right here, this thing is really critical. You will actually see that there's an eyeball, then there's these up and down arrows. I want to start with the up and down arrows. If you click on these are how you actually sort by all the different things that we were just looking at. Most people, if you're shooting and you've actually set up your session correctly, you would be doing it by name, because again, you would have a frame counter that would be following. So they all have the exact same name except for the frame counter that happens at the end. And so they'll be in order. But sometimes people will screw up their naming and things will go out of order. If that happens, then you actually can do a sort by date. And this, again, in our case, nothing is changing here because the naming is in order based on the dates to begin with. Does that make sense, everyone? What's more important is the eyeball that's sitting. Oh, also here, we've got a sort by date right now, so I need everybody to click on this window and come down and do a sort by date. So we put a little check mark next to it. If you do that repeatedly, what you'll see is, if you do it 2 times in a row, what you'll see is it actually puts a check mark next to this reverse. And what that's telling you is that it's now the reverse date order. If you uncheck that reverse, then this is the oldest one, is up at the very beginning. If you scroll all the way down, this is the latest one, is down at the bottom. If you want it to go in the exact opposite order, you can either click on those little arrows and click on reverse, or simply click on date a second time, and it will now give you the reverse order. Does that make sense, everyone? All right, so again, if things are appearing, oh God, it's not appearing the way it should, make sure this is where you go to check to see this is the sorting order for the browser part. So I'm going to click on date again. It will reverse it one more time, and we're back to where we wanted to be. Then I'm going to click on the eyeball that's right next to this. If you click on the eyeball that's right next to this, you have 3 possible different views. If you take a look at the first view right now, which is the one that we've actually got selected, you'll see it's supposed to look like multi-rows of icons. So if you click on that one, you can then actually change the size of your browser. So if you hover the cursor over the edge where the browser meets the viewer, you will get a double-headed arrow. And if you click and you start to drag this to the left, your thumbnails get bigger to a point. And then if you continue, you're going to get a second row. And then as you continue to move over, you will ultimately get a third row. And eventually you will only go so far because it will not let you cover your viewer. It just starts to shrink your viewer. But at this stage of the game, I cannot get it any wider. So there are people that prefer to actually edit this way. This is the way they would want to look at their stuff, is like this. I'm not one of those people, but nonetheless, that's the case. If you then click on the eyeball for the drop-down menu again, and you go to the next one, you will actually then get a list of these in a row, and still have your your viewer up on your screen, so you can see, you can go through these and say, oh, this is the one that I want to see right now. Oh, this is the one I want to see right now. Blah, 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 blah. Does that make sense to everyone what's going on here? Okay. If you click on those three, that little eyeball one more time, and you go to the last one, what the last one does is it makes your thumbnail as large as it can be, but only have a single column of that. You will see that no matter how much so I'm going to click between my viewer and the browser window again. I'm going to move this back and forth. These things do not change in size. Does that make sense what's going on here? So no matter what, they will get smaller, but what the advantage of this is that you will have everything that goes in a single column. And the advantage of this is that if I click on one of these right now, so I need everybody to do this. I need everybody to get a single column. I want you to click on the very top image, and then I want you to go to your arrow keys, and I want you to hit the down arrow, and it will go down to the next JPEG. Is your else JPEG really scattered like this one? Yeah. I don't know, who knows what that's about. Anyway, and you click on the next one, and then click your up arrow, it will go back up again, which is great. That makes sense, right? So this, again, this is a critical trick for when you are editing, and because a lot of times you're going to be the person sitting with the art director going through this stuff, but this is what you need to be aware of. I'm going to change my view, so click on the eyeball, you'll get this. Go back to the original thumbnails, the original icons that are where you have multiple ones. And then I want you to click and make your browser wider. Just make it 2 columns wider. And now again, I'm going to click on my top image right here. It's the girl in the white. But now, remember the behavior that we just had? When I hit the down and up arrow, it went through this in order. But look what happens now. I've got the top one clicked. If you hit the down arrow, it skips the JPEG that was really your frame number 2. It does not give you that. It actually gives you the next one right here. It's skipping all of this. I'm almost done with this part, and we will take a break because clearly some of us need it. To go back to this, go back up, click on the very first one again. Instead, what you want to do when you're navigating multiple columns, but this works in single column as well, you only want to use right and left arrows. You never want to use up and down, or you will skip work. So if you hit your right arrow, it goes to the crowns. If you hit the right arrow again, it drops down to the chalk. The right arrow again, the sunburned girl, the right arrow again. If you use your left arrow, you go back in that same order, no matter how many of these you have. If you drag this out to 3 frames, 3 thumbnails, again, your right arrow will step you through exactly the way it's supposed to be. If you use your up and down arrows, though, it will skip every other one. If we go back, last thing, if we go back to the eyeball, click on the eyeball down, it's got to be really hard for you to do this with your computer closed. Go back to the very top one, click on the single thumbnail only, scroll all the way up to the top, pick your number 1 thumbnail. Again, if you use your right and left arrows, it still respects this up and down order. So just note to self, only use right and left arrows when you're scanning through your thumbnails, never your up and down arrows, because you can end up skipping you can end up skipping 2/3 or 3/4 of your work. Are we good? Questions about this? Okay, I've got 2:14. I'm going to be generous. We'll call it 2:15. Be back at 2:25, and we will jump back in. All right, so if that wasn't enough in terms of all the stuff that's actually up here, I'm going to actually drag my browser down to make it a little bit smaller, and you can see you've got a bunch of browsers. I'm going to go all the way up to the top again and grab the girl that's actually in blue. So remember, I'm blue, oh Jesus. The girl that's in white up at the very top. Again, if you click on the little sort drop down, the 2 arrows on the sort drop down, everything in here is pretty evident to what it is. Again, you can sort by ISOs and focal lengths and all that kind of stuff. But down at the very bottom, there's this thing that says manual. If you click on manual and let go, What you can then do is you can actually grab a thumbnail and you can move it wherever you want it. So I'm going to take mine down. You can change the order. So now this is not being sorted at all, but there's nothing that's sorting this other than where you move stuff around. So again, I can do my eyeball drop down and go back to the original full set of possible thumbnails. I can drag this apart wider, and you can see, you can start moving stuff all over the place. I can start pushing stuff up around. That's all, and this can actually help in the whole editing process. If you've got something that an art director is just saying, God, I really wish I could see, you know, this image next to the pastels, well, then this is how you do it. If you then click on, again, that drop-down menu part right here, and we can go back to date, then it will undo all of that moving around. So this is how I work. Not that you have to do it this way, but this is how I work. I keep mine sorted by name because, again, when I shoot, it inherits the name of mine, and it always puts it in order. But date will do it as well. Just something to keep in mind. If for some reason your naming convention gets screwed up, you can actually do a sort by date, which will put it in chronological order, and then you can do a batch rename of everybody to clean up the screw up of names that meant it couldn't be in order. Does that make sense, everyone, what I just did? Okay. So, but in our case, I'm going to leave it as date. That's fine. But then in the drop-down eyeball, I also use the one on the far right. I only like a single thumbnail. And then, again, I don't need to crowd out my viewer. I want my viewer to be as big as my viewer can be. So as you just start to push over, I keep the thumbnails pretty big as well. Now, the reason this thumbnail itself is so small, it all has to do with the size of it gets big. I've actually been in all of this. Say what? Yeah, exactly. The one that says fit. You can click on this and make it smaller or larger. This is actually for the viewer. There is another one that you can do for thumbnails, but again, I don't deal with any of that part. I simply keep it here so that I keep them in the right size. So this is another trick. And for you guys on the Macintoshes, you can see how this works. For me, this is how I work. So sometimes when you're editing, when you guys edit, you go through and you star rate stuff, right? Or you tag it with, so it's either a number of stars or a color, right? I mean, that's basically the way you guys do it. So what happens here that gets to be weird is that if you take a look at my two images right now, you can sort of see what the way this is that if I hit the down arrow, do you know if there was just those two images above this? It's hard to know that part. So what I like to do in this is I will make my thumbnails so that I can see usually 4 of them at one time. If I can see these 4, then what I can do is I can select the top one, I can hold down my shift key and select the bottom one, and I get all 4 images right here. If you do not get 4 images right here, what's happening is that you need to look at these little 3 icons that are sitting over on the left side at the very top of your viewer on the left side. The one that's got multiple, it's sort of like it's got 4 little icons, that's what gives you this 4-up view. You that same 4-up view, but it will give you area around this so that you know that, again, let's say you were shooting on black and you wanted to be sure that you were seeing the entire image with borders. This is what that view will actually give you. And then if you click on the next one over here, this is actually about masking, which we will get together later on. So I'm going to uncheck this, but I'm also going to uncheck the 4 square one. And even though I've got 4 images selected, I don't see all 4 because I unselected the multi-image part. So if you click on this, but the reason I bring this up is that now here, and I can actually star rate or color rate these 4 images, but then when I come over to my browser and I click once, it goes to the next 4. So then I can click on this one, hold down the shift key, click on this one, and I'm constantly getting these 4 after 4 after 4 after 4. Does that make sense? And I don't worry about missing something. It gets to be really confusing when you start going through these if you're only using your up and down or your left and right arrow keys to scroll through this part. If you want to do it in batches, because most art directors want to see this stuff in batches. Okay, let me look at this 4. Great, I love the one on the top left. Go to the next 4. Okay, great, I like the one on the bottom. I go to the next 4. Oh, I don't like any of those. Go to the next 4. That's basically the way people work. People do not want to try to go through this one by one by one. You'll just get too confused. Make sense? All right. So This is tricky. Does everybody have 4 images up right now? Go ahead and get 4 images up. So if you click on one of these images, all it does is highlight the image. You don't get rid of the other guys. To get rid of the selection that you've got, we need to essentially deselect all of the thumbnails. To do that, you come over to the browser. You do not select the image. You go into the area that's right to the, either you can do it on these vertical images, something that's right to the either the right or left side of it, and click once, and it will get rid of everything. And then you can click on the image itself to see what it is, and then you can move on. If you've got, again, a 4 image like we've got right here, so I'm gonna, sorry. All 4 images right here. To get rid of that part, you can see there's an area above the horizontal one right here. You click on that part and it will deselect everyone, and then you can pick the image that you're looking for. Again, that's little things like that that will drive you absolutely out of your mind. Okay, whew. Back up to the top. I'm just going to keep this image on. You can keep any image on that you want. If you're really tired of looking at the girl in white, you can put on the pastels. It doesn't really matter, that part. What I'm going to talk about now is the rest of the whole interface where we are right now. So up at the very top on the left-hand side, we are looking at the library icon. So this is where we're at right now. Again, we've talked about what our session folders are. Again, we will look at session albums, favorites later. We looked at the, if we scroll down on this side even more, you will see that there are some drop-down menu parts that you can get right here. These are all things that we can sort by. So these are all filters over here. This whole group is filtering. So you can filter by your rating, you can filter by color tags, you can filter by date. You can keep going down here. You can filter by keywords, by whether this file was exported or not. All of this stuff exists down here. Then in continuing with that whole metadata part, you've got keywords, keyword library, and then metadata in general. So that's what's basically underneath all of this. However, so that's what's in the library. If you click on the one to the right of it, the tether one, this is all about cameras. But again, these are collections of tools. So these things are called tool tabs. The thing that's underneath it that's actually in there are called tools. So you can see right now, I've got exposure evaluation. And if you click on this image, you see that there is no exposure evaluation here. But if you go down to one of the raw files, so you can click on the raw file of me, you do get an exposure evaluation here. You get a histogram of what's going on in this image. So does everybody have this one selected? And you can see that you do have a histogram. I find the exposure evaluation worthless because you can take a look at this image. If you didn't know what the image was, and you see this spike in the highlights right here, you might think that this image is overexposed. I don't bother to screw with that stuff. I use color cards to determine my exposure. So this exposure evaluation is a worthless tool to me. I don't ever use it. I can get rid of it. To get rid of it, you come to the little 3 dots. So I need everybody, you're going to get rid of this. I need, again, please do this stuff with me. If you click on this little 3 dots right here, you can say, I want you to remove the tool. Before you do that, no, that's okay, don't worry about it. Just watch up here. To get rid of this tool, you can click on remove the tool. But if you don't know what this tool does, if you don't understand exposure evaluation, you need to be online to do this. But if you click on those little 3 dots, this is true for every single tool there is. You can come down here to say online help. And when you do that, as long as you're online, it will take you right to Capture One's website, and it will walk you through everything about what this tool is and what it does. So this is true for all the other tools. If you don't really understand, oh my God, I don't really get this capture naming thing. I don't understand what they're asking me to do. Click on the little 3 dots and come down and say, I want to see what is this, what's capture naming all about? And it will take you right here, and this explains capture naming for you so you can actually figure this stuff out. This is a lifesaver. You can download the menu for the manual for this. It is you can go to Capture One's website and download the manual for this. I do keep one, but it's only in case that you're going to be in some place where you get no cell service or you can't get online. So one or the other. If you are out in the field and you're not really near anything where you can plug in and there's no wireless, remember you can always use your phone as a hotspot And as long as you're connected to your phone as a hotspot, then you will have access to this. Make sense? All right, so I'm going to go back up to the top. I am going to get rid of my exposure evaluation by clicking on Remove Tool. So now the tool's gone, and I'm thinking, oh my God, that was a mistake. I really want this tool back. If you hover over the tool tab that says tethered, hold down your control key. Again, this is another right click. You can click on Add Tool, and any tool that exists, this is the entire set of every tool that exists in Capture One. It's exhausted. But what we were looking for is the exposure evaluation tool, and if you click on that, it brings the tool back. But usually when it brings it back in, it's going to stick it in the middle of your tool tab, which is not where it was before. You can move these around. If you click on the exposure evaluation, you can actually drag it back up to the top again, and it will reside up there. You can also click and tear this off, and you can have this just sitting out on its own. Even though it's covering part of my picture, that's fine, whatever, I can live with that. So again, if we want to get back to where we were originally, let's say you've screwed all of this stuff up and it's just like, it is a hot mess. You can always come up to your window menu, down to workspace, down to default, and it will bring it all back the way it was. And again, click on tether and you can see it's all sitting up here again. So I'm going to actually go back to my library and we're going to take a look at this part here really quickly. Yeah. So if we take a look at this in the standard library right here, if your screen, you'll see if you hover over the edge of the, so there's an area right here. This is your viewer, this is the browser, these are your tools here. Those are the three major areas. And then you've also got a sort of a set of tool tabs that are sitting up here in the very top. Those are basically the four areas that we can work with. If you hover your cursor between the toolbar, this part that's up here, and the viewer, you will get the double-headed arrow, and you can actually make this thing wider or shorter. If you make it as short as it can go, you will notice that you lose some of the tools up here, and that's what these double-headed arrows are now about. If you click on those, these are the two hidden because I made this column too narrow. If you click on this and pull it back out again, they show themselves again. So again, all of this can be customizable. If you do not like one of these, we've already talked, you can get rid of the entire tool tab. So control click on, again, I'm going to hover over the tool tab, the one that says refine. I'm going to click on that and I'm going to say remove the refine tab. And now it's going to say, are you sure you want to do that? And I'm going to say, yes, I'm sure I want to do that. And now it is gone. And now let's say, well, I use shape, but I don't use it a whole lot, but I want to keep it here as a part of my workspace. You can hold down the command key. This will again be the control key on Windows. Click on this and you can actually drag this to a different spot. So I'm going to bring shape all the way over. Sorry. And shape is now sitting over here. So you can move stuff around in here. Does that make sense, everyone? So we can subtract tools, we can add tools, we can move tool tabs around. If you come over to the little three dots that are on the far side and you click on this, you will see that you have an Add Tool tab, and all the ones that currently exist will be grayed out. However, there's one down at the bottom that doesn't exist. This is the Custom Tool tab. And what this allows you to do is create your own tool tab that only has the tools that you really care about or that you use. So I'm going to click on this Custom Tool tab. It's going to say, well, what do you want to call this? I'm going to call it Verser. You can create your custom tool tab and give it your name. In the drop-down menu that's next to it for the icon, what do you want the icon to look like? Well, I am a star, so I'm going to actually add star. But you can pick any of these icons that you want. I'm going to pick star for mine. Say what? Oh, right. I know, really, right? How much smaller can they get this shit? Anyway, so I'm going to go ahead and say Add Tab. And you can see now here's Verser's tab. It's named. It's actually got its little icon, but it is completely blank. So now I am going to customize this the way I like it or the things that I want. So hovering in the middle space, you can actually hover over the top. It doesn't matter where you really do this part. I'm going to hover over the space, hold down my control key, right click and say I want to add a tool. And the first thing that I'm actually going to add for mine is the camera, is just the whole camera guy. So this is my camera part because I like this guy. This tells me whether I'm tethered or not, so I like this guy. Right underneath it, I'm going to hold down the control key, click. I'm going to add another tool, and you guys can add anything that you want. I like focus. I want to do a focus check on mine, so I'm going to add focus to mine next. So this is going to give me a focus part on here. And then finally, on the one underneath this, you guys, if you've been in any of my shooting classes, you know I like to warm things up and cool things off. I'm going to click in the area underneath here, hold down my control key, click, and I'm going to add my color tool. Oh, that was bad. So for the people on the video, I just lost my projector screen. Okay, son of a bitch. I'm not breathing. Okay, this grid was not what I wanted to add here, so I'm going to click on these little three dots and I'm going to remove this tool. What I was looking to add, again, control click to add tool, and what I'm really looking to add here is color and yeah. No, I don't want color balance, I want the color editor. No, actually, well, no, I don't want the color editor, so I'm going to remove that. It's probably the exposure tool. The exposure tool, yeah. And so this is where I can control exposure. Son of a bitch, it doesn't have good. All right, god damn it. I'm going to check here to see what it's really called. In my adjust menu. Oh, the white balance tool. Hello. Okay, so back to Verser, down at the bottom, control click, add tool, white balance tool. So these would be the things that I want. And you can see, as I start to add more and more tools, things start collapsing because you can really make, I mean, you can jam this thing full of stuff. But then this becomes the place that I go for just all of my stuff, right? I mean, the stuff that is important to me. It's just a great way of working. However, if we're going to do this, and you go to all the trouble of doing this, you don't want to build this every single time you do it. So instead, you come up to the window menu, please do this with me, down to workspace, and you are going to save this workspace. And a dialog will open up, and Capture One is insane about the ability to do this stuff. You can save everything. So it just saves you the time of not having to do it again. So I'm going to call this Verser's Workspace. And say save. Now, all of this, everything in here just got saved, and this is where it got saved to. Go back to your library, control click on the capture folder, say show me this in the Finder. Those changes were written into this preference file right here. Now, this preference file is, there's no way you can go in here and dig this and dig it out of this thing. It's just when you launch this particular session, that thing will be available to you because that information was stored in here. If you want to get to the workspace, which is a very smart thing to do, because as a tech, you are going to develop how you want to do something over and over and over again. And to do that, you don't want to have to rebuild it every single time. So to find this, I'm hoping I can find this as quickly as I think I know where it is. You need to get to your library. So in Windows, you need to get to, it's going to be in a control panel, I think. It's wherever your preferences are kept. So Ali, I'll actually shoot me an email. I will find where it is on Windows for you. But at any rate, for the people who are on Macintosh, this is actually a hidden folder. So you need to go to the Finder, To get to the Finder, if you come up to, again, the folder that we're looking for is your user library. It's not the library for your whole system. It is the user library. If you click on the Go menu item, you will not see library in here. Depending on the version of Macintosh you have, you hold down either the Shift key or the Option key. When I hold down the Shift key, it does not show up. When I hold down the Option key, it does. It's right here called Library. You want to select the library, but then most people do not want to have to memorize that keyboard shortcut. So if you come up next to the word that says library up at the very top, if you go just to the left of it and click, well, you need to hover over it. Yep, there it goes. Click on it, you will get a little icon of the library folder. Click on that folder and drag it over into your favorites and let go. And now forevermore, you will not have to remember that go trick. You simply click on library. So I think I'm going to go looking for it here. There's two possible places this could be. It's either going to be in application support or it's going to be in preferences. And let me see if I've actually got this one right here. Hang on 1 second. I'm ahead of myself. Let's see if we can't find it really quickly. So anyway, library, I'm going to click on, again, application support. And then it's sometimes they call it Capture One. Sometimes they call it Phase instead. So I am not seeing a Capture One in here. I'm going to go down and see if I see it as Phase 1. That's the other place that they'll actually put it. And I don't see it down in here, but what I do, wait, I thought it was an application support. I am in application support. Sorry, it's right here. I'm looking in the wrong place. Here's Capture One right here. And inside of Capture One, if I scroll down, here is Workspaces right here. And inside of Workspaces, I just actually had my folder that I just named, Verser's Workspace, right here. You copy, do not remove this, because you want to be able to keep it, but I'm going to click and drag this to, let me get rid of this folder right here so I can see my desktop. Get rid of this one. How many folders could I have open here? I'm going to hide my others. I'm just going to take this workspace and try to get it to move. I'm going to drag it down here, but you see, if I let go right now, it's going to remove it from my workspaces. I do not want to do that. I'm going to add the Option key, and you should get an Option key, and you'll get a little plus. And now this is my custom workspace right here. You put that on a hard drive, and forevermore, all you do is when you start up, it will have all of your settings the way you like it, your custom folders, your custom tricked out, your everything, the way you treat all of this stuff will be there. Make sense? Again, every digital tech I know has their own custom workspace, and they keep it on a thumb drive that they can put on any machine so that they don't spend an hour trying to get this set up the way they like it. And guys, it remembers everything. I mean, everything. All of this stuff. It'll remember any custom work, anything that you do in here. All right, are we good on this part? All right. So we were at 25. Yeah, we need another 5 minutes. I didn't start my timer, so we're going to move on for another 5 minutes. Let me just see where we're at. All right, we've done all of that. That is done. Oh, this is a good one to know about. Come up to your window menu, down to Workspaces, and there should be, there has always been, but I don't see it now. There used to be a black and white workspace in here. So one of the things that we're not seeing here in our tool tab part over here that I am going to actually add to Verser, to my custom one. So I'm going to click on this custom one right here. I'm going to come down to the bottom here, and I'm going to control click to add a tool. Please do this with me. And you are going to add black and white. Now you've actually got a way to essentially, it's not going to change these. These are raw files. Again, you can't go in there and change them. They will always be in color, but you can actually show all of this in black and white. So if you click on Enable Black and White, your image goes black and white. Now this is only the image that I'm actually looking at right here. If I go to another one of my images, it does not have enable black and white. This is image specific. However, coming over into your browser, if you hit Command A, it will actually select all of your files, and then you can click on enable black and white, and they will all go to black and white. Say what? So select any one of your thumbnails, hit Command A, it will select everyone. But again, you can't see that it's selected everyone because this is not set to show you multiple files. Click on that little icon right there. And then you see them all, and you click on enable black and white, and they will all change to black and white. It may not change the, it's not going to change the JPEGs, it's only going to change the raw files. So that's why the pastels are still in color. Of course, it looks like all of these, it didn't change all of these guys. How frustrating is that? Anyway, once you do enable black and white, if you enable it as you are shooting, then every single thing that you actually go through and shoot will actually go here. And there is a way to do a copy and paste of styles on all of this, but that's ahead of the game, so we are not going to go quite there yet. So anyway, any questions about any of this part so far? All right. Okay. We looked at that part. Back to the library. So if you click on the library, again, I don't want to see all of these folders up here, so I'm going to click on this part right here to get rid of that. I'm going to go back up to the very top and select the image that I've actually been working with right here. So I've got this part that's actually going up here for me right now, and I am going to, catalog part, sessions, preferences, got that. New session, we've gone through that. Sorry, guys. Okay. Oh, don't do this to me. I've got my okay. So we have talked about session folders here. Now we are going to look down here to, I am going to do, I think, I'm going to do session albums right now. So this is the first place that we're going to actually go down to on this. So again, let me click on my capture folder right here. And let me take a look through this and make sure, I've got something going on in here. So in session albums, what albums are all about is it's a way to cull your images, to actually have things that are either rated star-wise, whatever, or rated color-wise, or you can do it for all sorts of different things in here. So what this is about, and these actually cover everything that would be in this session. So to actually leverage this part, if you come down and you click on your 5-star images right here, I don't see any that are selected here, which is problematic because I do have 5-star images that are actually on this. If I click on all images here, I also don't have anything here, so that seems to be a problem for me. So we're going to actually see if we can't build a session. This seems like this is a problem, and I'm not sure what that is right now, but we'll find. Say what? So it picked all of yours, right? Is it selecting all of yours? When you guys select your 5 stars, do you see anything in your viewer? Oh, let me try this really quick. Actually, we've hit our half-hour mark. Let's just call this, be back at 310. I'm going to pause this and make sure I can get this stuff working again. All right, so all it took was a restart of Capture One to get my 5-star session album to work again. And if we click on all images, the advantage of working on all images, I'm going to show you in just a second. It's a very difficult thing to do once we start breaking out subfolders, which we're going to get to in just a little bit, but nonetheless, that's what it's all about. These are all ones that are made by Capture One that are included in this, but you can include your own as well. It doesn't have to be this way. It doesn't have to be this. So to add this, and again, please do this with me, come over to your session albums, click on the little plus, and you see you have two options. Darius, are you going to do this work, or are you just going to call it a day? So you have two options. You have album and you have smart album. So album is strictly a drag and drop thing for you. It's just exactly what all it is it's a dumb album, for lack of a better way of putting it. So if we're going to make one, so go ahead and click on album, and I'm just going to call this Versus Picks. You can call yours whatever you want, just some name that makes sense to you. Say what? I'm sorry, what? Yeah, so again, right across here where it says session albums, I just clicked on the plus. You get a drop down menu. You can either do a regular album or a smart album. I'm going to do a regular album. You could think of it as a stupid album. So with the stupid album, I'm going to rename it, and I'm going to call it Versus Picks. And I am not going to do any of these other things that are on here, selecting these other things. I'm just going to say OK. And you'll see right here, it now says Versus Picks. And then I'm going to come over here, and I'm going to grab the girl in the white and the weird, the weird other image. Oh, that's what's going on. That's really funny in here. So let me go back to my Versus Picks. My capture folder. So again, I've got Versus Picks right here, stupid album. I'm going to click on the first one and the second one, and I'm going to drag both of these into Versus Picks. So if you click on this and simply pull the icons over onto Versus Picks, you'll see it gets highlighted and you let go. What you'll notice is that it doesn't look like anything has changed. You still see these both are sitting right here in the capture folder, because the capture folder is what is actually been is highlighted. But if you come down and you click on Versus Picks, you've only got two now, because that's the only thing we drug in there. If we go back to capture folder, the important thing to remember in this, though, is it does not move your picks it does not move these two images from your capture folder into the Versus Picks. All this does is it creates an alias of those pictures. They are still in the capture folder. We did not move these things out of the capture folder. They are still there. All we did was create a reference to them here. Does that make sense? You can actually then drag these back out. So I'm only going to drag one. I'm going to leave the girl in white in there, but I'm going to drag the one in, or actually you can just hit the delete key. I'm going to pick the one of the crowns and just hit the delete key. It is now gone. But if you go back to the capture folder, it has not been removed from the capture folder. So these albums are simply ways of sorting your imagery without doing anything destructive to your capture folder. It just makes references to stuff. You drag stuff in, you drag stuff out. That's just as simple as it is. Again, it's a stupid folder. Does that make sense, everyone? All right, so I am going to, you can actually, if you want to remove the stupid folder Versus Picks, you select it and simply click on the minus, and it will say, are you sure you want to delete this thing? And I'm going to say, yes, I do want to delete the thing. Now I don't see any pictures at all. What's wrong? Again, when you're first working in Capture One, this is the thing that will fuck you up every time. We don't see anything because we don't have any folders selected. There's nothing selected here, so you don't see anything. You need to go back and click on your capture folder to see everything. So again, it's small things like that that will completely screw you up, and you're just sort of like, well, what's going on? And it's like, well, you don't have anything selected, so how can it show you anything? Okay, so that's stupid albums. We're going to click and we're going to do a smart album now. So I'm going to click on this drop-down menu. I'm going to click the plus menu, and I'm going to say I want to do a smart album. And in the smart album, you can build conditions. So there are a set of presets that exist. So if you click on the drop-down for the presets, you'll see that you can add a condition of a 1 star or higher, or 2 stars or higher, or 3 stars. You can actually select colors here to actually have other ones. So I'm going to say let's build a folder that's actually got a green, anything in this image that is tagged with green. So I'm going to click on this thing and it's going to say green, and I'm going to say, okay, that sounds smart. You need to name that smart album, and I'm going to say tagged green. And then simply say, okay. Then what you will have is a tagged green folder. If you come down here and you click on it, you will see there's only one image that I had in mind that had a green tag on it, and it's sitting right here. Does that make sense? All right, I'm going to get rid of this green tag folder. We're going to build a more complex one. So I'm going to get rid of this guy. So I just clicked, again, I clicked on the green smart album. I hit the minus icon at the very top right across from session albums. It gets rid of the whole thing. I'm going to build a more complicated one. So I'm going to take a look through my images and see what I've really got in here. I've got... let me see if I've got a couple of red ones. I know at least I've got a couple of yellow ones. Yeah, so I've got 2 yellow ones. Yeah, all right, so that's the one I'm going to build. So I'm going to come over here. I'm going to click on the plus again for my session albums. I'm going to come down to Smart Album. And the first one I'm going to do is use the preset to say yellow. So I'm going to pick this yellow one right here. And then I can actually add another condition to this. So if you click on the plus underneath the search criteria, click on the plus, you can actually say, okay, and I want to, what else do I want to do on this? If you click on the drop-down menu, you have all of these options that are based for this. So on one of my options, I'm going to say on here, camera make. In the camera make, and then it's going to equal, and then I can type in Canon here. And then say okay to that. And it's going to say, oh, you should really name that thing. And I was like, oh, you're right, I should name this thing. You can name it right here. So I'm going to do this Canon tagged yellow. And say save. And then see if anything shows up into here. And lo and behold, both of these were shot with Canon and both of these were tagged yellow. Does that make sense to everyone? What's going on here? All right, with both of these, did you guys get 2 images that were tagged? Our ratings, you simply use 0 through 5. So if you hit the 0 key, you'll see it gets rid of all the stars. If you hit the 5 key, it'll bring them all back. If you hit the 4 key, it'll only give it 4 stars. So what I'm going to do on here is I'm going to build a new album, a new smart album right here, and you will see that it won't be the same. And in this one, I'm going to do the same thing in the beginning. I'm going to say I want to tag it anything that's tagged in yellow. And then I'm going to add a condition, and the condition that I'm going to add is any camera make, and equals, and I'm going to put in Canon. Son of a bitch. This thing is driving me crazy. All right, Canon. And then I'm going to add a third condition here. I'm going to click on this, and I'm going to say, I want the rating equal 5 stars. So I'm going to click the 5th one up here and say OK. It's going to say, hey, idiot, you need to name this stuff. And I'm going to, oh yeah, I forgot, Canon. Just click on the 5-star and then hit OK. And now you need to name it. So I'm going to call it Canon yellow tag 5-star. You have got to be kidding me. and I'm going to hit save. So now if we take a look at that image down here and click on it, you can see there's only one image in here, not the two, because it has to meet all the conditions. This is the only image that I have that is tagged yellow, that has 5 stars, and that is a Canon model. Did that make sense to everyone? Okay, this gets better. You can get rid of all of these guys right now. So I'm going to click on the minus button to get rid of this. I'm going to click on the minus button to get rid of that. And that gets rid of all of these. All right, I'm going to click on my capture folder again to actually see what I've got going on here. And yeah, I'm going to hold off on building these automatically until we get down to our filters. So the next part here, and this is actually one of the most important parts that I can show you. You're not going to get this really many other places, but it's a strategy that every professional digital tech I know uses. It's also every professional photographer I know that uses this. So we've got a capture folder right now that's in our session. So how many images do you guys shoot in a typical session? You're in the studio. Ellie, how many did you shoot yesterday? You were like floored that how much space you get. Ballpark it. It doesn't need to be exact. Like how many? 130, right? That's a lot to look through, right? So when I shoot as a fashion guy, typically what happens with me is I will have anywhere from 10 to 15 outfits a day to actually shoot. And what I'll do is I will number each one of those, shot 4, shot 5, so that it's easier for me to sort. You got to go through, at 130, you got to go through all 130, right? So imagine amplifying this out into like a week's worth of shooting, and you did 130 a day. Well, that's over 1,000 images. You want some structure to that. You don't want this all to be just this one giant hot mess, right? So what I do is I actually leverage this to shoot to subfolders. So there's a way to actually make subfolders. So it's the next part down. You see this thing that says session favorites? Everybody has bitched about this being named session favorites. It's got, what's a favorite to you? Isn't it the image that you put that's got a little heart on it, right? This has got nothing to do with that. This has got nothing to do with favorites. It's got nothing to do with picking. So everybody in this room right now, or anybody listening to this, needs to think this should not be called session favorites. This should be called session subfolders. Are we good on this part? So there are 2 ways to make this. I'm going to show you the long, laborious way of doing it, and then I'm going to show you the quick shortcut that everyone uses. So the long, laborious version of this is that you click on the plus icon right here, saying that you want to create a session favorite. Then you need to navigate to the folder that we are working in our capture folder. So again, if you click on the pictures folder to navigate there, look at the very bottom one on here. Again, I've always got my stuff sorted by a name, and it's also in a column view. So if yours is different than mine, you can click on this little drop-down menu here, and you can actually pick name. And then you can also click on this little column right here and say you want to see this as columns, not as icons. Nobody uses icons anymore, guys. It's just way too confusing. So at any rate, columns, and then by name. And this will come up, and I can see the one that's on the very bottom. It's also today's date. I'm going to click on that. Then I'm going to go to the capture folder. And inside this capture folder, I'm going to click on new folder. And in this new folder, I'm simply going to give it a 2 number extension. I'm going to call it 01 and say create. And then add. And then you can see over here in my session favorites, even though it's got this stupid little heart next to it, this has got nothing to do with that. This is now sitting as 01. Does that make sense? We good on this part? Okay.